Well, I always say that a book is probably the most complete form of your message. You can have a website, and well, you need a website now. No one really takes you seriously in anything unless you have a website. But what are the chances of people reading everything that's on your website? What are the chances of people reading everything in your blog? Or what are the chances of people even seeing all of your social media posts? All those things are important. I'm not saying now just write a book and forget about all of that. It's all
No,
needed.
of course not.
But there's something about writing a book, and this is something that all of my clients, I've published 52 authors now, and what they've loved about it is it was a chance for them to really get the entirety of their message into one cohesive whole. And then from that, a lot of my clients disseminate a lot of what they talk about in their books. They then break it out into blogs and they repurpose it for social media. And, I've even had several of my clients use topics in their book and they've honed it into, keynote speeches that they go and do. So there's lots of things you can use to repurpose that work. But it's nice for them to have one place that has everything. And then they can really point people to, if people really want to understand, why do you do this? Why is this mission so important to you?
Welcome to the Better Life for Animals podcast, where we amplify the voices of animal advocates, sanctuaries, and changemakers working toward a kinder, more compassionate world. Through powerful stories and expert insights, we shine a light on the efforts to rescue, protect, and advocate for animals. Be sure to subscribe wherever you're watching or listening. Every follower helps us reach more people. And support animal sanctuaries. Enjoy the conversation.
Mitali Deypurkaystha, known as the Vegan Publisher, is a best-selling author, book consultant, and keynote speaker. She specializes in helping ethical entrepreneurs, B Corp founders, and changemakers become thought leaders through strategic book publishing. With over 25 years of experience in media, marketing, and writing, Mitali has ghostwritten business books generating millions in revenue. Her imprint, Let's Tell Your Story Publishing, amplifies voices of social justice, sustainability, and animal ethics. A passionate vegan since 2012, Mitali's mission is to inspire conscious leadership and drive positive global change through the power of books. Mitali's journey into publishing began at 16 when she won a script writing scholarship, later pursuing degrees in media studies and journalism. After freelancing for local newspapers and magazines, she developed a strong foundation in media and storytelling. Her life took a pivotal turn in 2010 after adopting a rescue cat that opened her eyes to animal sentience, ultimately leading her to embrace veganism. In 2015, Mitali became a leading copywriter and ghostwriter, authoring business books and marketing materials that generated over £6.5 million in additional revenue for her clients. Her best-selling book, The Freedom Master Plan, outlines how her clients have leveraged their books to build unshakable authority, attract clients, and become thought leaders who drive meaningful change. Through her imprint, Mitali works with socially conscious entrepreneurs, sustainability practitioners, and ethical business owners, guiding them to create books that influence positive change. Her goal is to empower these change makers and tell their stories and create a global movement where exploitation of humans, animals, and the planet is no longer tolerated. Mitali, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
I see that you became vegan quite some time ago and that it started with your cat. Perhaps you could tell us that story.
Well, I'll be honest with you, Cheryl, I didn't want her when she first came into my life. My youngest sister was at school at the time and she wanted a cat. I didn't want a cat, neither did anybody else in the family, but she was very clever, my sister. She was only 14 at the time, but instead of doing what most teenagers would do, which is sulk and slam doors and you know what teenagers are like.
Yes.
She instead decided to create a petition, and she got over 100 signatures from a school, including her teacher and even the head teacher. and a few of our neighbors too. So we felt that that kind of behavior couldn't go unrewarded. That's kind of what you want from a teenager, that kind of
Absolutely.
ability to think critically and think logically and do something about it. So we decided to, we relented and we got her this cat. Within 2 weeks, I'd just fallen in love with her. We called it Isha. And my book is actually dedicated to her and another cat. I've lost them both since. They've both died to cancer.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay. They had, all I can say is they had an amazing life while they were alive with us. I mean, we used to joke that, my mother, if she left the house, she'll come in and she wouldn't even ask about any of her kids. It was, what about the cats? Are the cats okay? Have they eaten? Have they slept? Have they gone out for a bit in the sun? Are they back? Have they had too much sun? She was so interested in the cats. She didn't really care about her daughters and her son. So they had an amazing life. But within 2 weeks of Isha being in my life, I was just watching this she's a very tiny cat as well. And she was just wandering around with so much understanding of this family. And it's almost like she was aware of which member of her new family needed her most that day. Who's had a bad day at work? Who's, not had a very good, maybe had a run-in with somebody, or who's feeling very tired today, not very energetic, and she needs to bring up their mood. She just knew. And that sent me down a rabbit hole, a Google rabbit hole. We've all been down Google rabbit holes where
Absolutely.
you put something in and then it's like, oh, I need to know more. I need to know more. So I was just intrigued. How sentient are cats? How intelligent are they? And then I discovered they're not even really, they're very intelligent, but they're not even in the top 20, or certainly not in the top 10 of most intelligent animals. And then I realized that pigs were more intelligent than dogs, and we eat those. Mm-hmm. And that just made my stomach turn. I just thought, that's not good. The realization that rats, for example, are more intelligent than cats. And yet we dote on our cats, but rats are pests or things that we test on, horrible experiments on, just so that we can wear makeup and have toiletries and that sort of thing. So it just completely changed my view. What I thought was, oh, that's just what people do. We eat animals and we test on them because, we have this false idea that if we don't test on animals, then what are we going to do? Test on humans? That's even worse. Well, actually, we don't even need to test on animals in the first place. They're not even really good tests. They don't show it. Something could be safe for an animal, does not mean it's safe for a human being. There are subtle differences in our biology. So there are other lab tests now that are much more accurate, and it doesn't involve hurting and killing animals. Exactly. So things like that, I just didn't know. I just I drank the Kool-Aid. But, we've got to harm some animals. We have to eat them because where we're going to get our protein from, and we have to test on them because, well, we need toiletries, and who are we going to test our toiletries on other human beings? That's not nice. I drank that Kool-Aid. So Isha unblocked that for me. She sent me down this rabbit hole on Google, and the more I learned, the more I thought, this is terrible. I don't want to have anything to do with it. And I pretty much became vegan within a few months. I think the first few months I tried to do that thing that some of us do, which is like, okay, I will just eat organic meat. Or we fool ourselves into thinking if we just eat organic meat, or if we just go to it's not intensive farming, if we just go to where they're nice to their pigs and to their cows before they kill them or before they have them raped and, to have milk and this sort of thing. And I fooled myself for a few months until I realized that there is no sitting on the fence with this, you either have to believe it's wrong or you don't believe it's wrong. It's as simple as that. So within a few months, I'd gone full vegan.
It sounds as though Isha raised your consciousness.
She really did, without knowing. And I always jokingly say, it's interesting that I needed a true carnivore to turn me vegan. But that's exactly what happened.
Yes. I have read your book, The Freedom Master Plan. Congratulations on that. I love books like this. It reminds me of some of those Marianne Williamson quotes where it's like, who are we not to shine? We're not meant to live small, because this book is all about.
You're listening to Better Life for Animals podcast. Our mission is to amplify the voices of animal advocates, sanctuaries, and changemakers working toward a kinder, more compassionate world. But we can't do it alone. We need your help. First of all, go ahead and subscribe to this channel wherever you're watching or listening. And then get involved by visiting betterlifeforanimals.com. That's betterlifeforanimals.com. Be sure to check out our blog, learn more about incredible sanctuaries, and explore our book section, where 100% of net proceeds from book sales are donated to sanctuaries. Every action you take helps to make a difference. And remember, subscribe to this channel. And now, back to the show.
Putting yourself out there, getting your message out there. And I love how you're using it for, the vegan compassionate cause. And specifically, I think we can talk about how something like this could help with people trying to run an animal sanctuary. Because one of the reasons we're doing this is they don't have the time, and sometimes they don't have the resources to promote themselves because they're too busy just keeping everybody safe and fed, quite frankly.
Yes.
So can we talk a little bit about how becoming an author and your book can help promote these compassionate causes that you and I believe so deeply about?
Yeah, of course. Well, I always say that a book is probably the most complete form of your message. You can have a website, and well, you need a website now. No one really takes you seriously in anything unless you have a website. But what are the chances of people reading everything that's on your website? What are the chances of people reading everything in your blog? Or what are the chances of people even seeing all of your social media posts? All of those things are important. I'm not saying now just write a book and forget about all of that. It's all
No,
needed.
of course not.
But there's something about writing a book, and this is something that all of my clients, I've published 52 authors now, and what they've loved about it is it was a chance for them to really get the entirety of their message into one cohesive whole. And then from that, a lot of my clients disseminate a lot of what they talk about in their books. They then break it out into blogs and they repurpose it for social media. And, I've even had several of my clients use topics in their book and they've honed it into, keynote speeches that they go and do. So there's lots of things you can use to repurpose that work. But it's nice for them to have one place that has everything. And then they can really point people to, if people really want to understand, why do you do this? Why is this mission so important to you? That this book will contain the main message. So I think that's important, especially I think if you run a sanctuary or anything that's very mission led. I mean, sanctuaries straight away, I would say animal sanctuaries are second only to really children's charities when it comes to tugging at heartstrings. Like, people get it. But there are so many animal sanctuaries out there. So why do people want to give you their money instead of somebody else? So it's kind of really just standing out. And I think becoming an author, it does that. It really does that, because I'm not just talking about animal sanctuaries here. I'm talking about think of any group of people. Let me give you an example. I'll think of a group of people who've got nothing to do with animal sanctuaries. So for some reason, I've got lawyers in my head. I don't know why I've got lawyers in my head, but let's just go with lawyers. If you pick 100 lawyers just on the streets, just find 100 lawyers and you put them into a room and you ask them, how many of you have a website? I would expect pretty much all of them to put their hands up and say, well, yes, it's 2025. Of course, we need websites. We couldn't exist. If I ask them, how many of you have social media profiles and you actively post on social media about what you do? And again, I expect most, if not all of the hands to shoot up, because who doesn't use social media for business nowadays? But if I ask, well, how many of you are authors? How many of you have written a book on some subject about law to help your target market, your clients, or maybe fellow lawyers, junior lawyers? I expect suddenly you may just get a handful of hands that go up, if you're lucky. I have spoken in rooms where all the hands went down and no one had written a book. So that's what makes you a point. That's the differentiation point, I would say, that once you become an author, people do see you as like, okay, you're an expert above other experts because you've written a book. And the same thing for an animal sanctuary. It's like, oh, whoa, you've written a book that makes you different from other sanctuaries. So definitely it can be leveraged to get more eyeballs. And especially as a sanctuary, you rely on donations. And I've spoken to a number of charitable organizations, and they've always said that, most of their donations, I think it's the 80-20 rule, 80% of the donations come from just 20% of their sponsors.
It's amazing.
So those people are the ones who are really bought into your mission. They're the ones who are happily, businesses or individuals that are happily sending you thousands, if not tens of thousands a month. If you can get them to even buy in even more to what you do and really understand your goals, I mean, they can just end up spending a lot more with you, and that's more animals that you can help and impact. So yeah, I think books are a fantastic way of. There are other ways. I would say probably better than books would be if you can get a documentary made about you. That's incredible. But first of all, the chances of somebody else greenlighting that is very, very slim. And if you want to do it by yourself, I have a friend at the moment who is going through the process of creating a documentary. He's now on his third round of fundraising for it. He's already raised $160,000. And
Wow.
It's still not completed. He's now on his third. So now you can get the understanding that it's like, that's a lot of money to raise just to create a film. And like you said, most animal sanctuaries, they're just trying to look after their animals. And then it becomes difficult when you think, should I be spending money on the animals, or should I be spending money on this film? And it becomes very, very difficult to justify spending that kind of money. Whereas a book is a lot cheaper to produce. It's certainly not going to cost you tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars to put together a professional book.
Right. I'm thinking of all the many people running sanctuaries, and I'm wondering if, not all of them maybe business minded. Maybe they didn't, write a business plan before they started. Oftentimes it's because something desperate landed in their lap and they needed to save it. And one thing led to another. Next thing you know, we have a dozen animals. But still, what you're saying, if you really want to, stay in this wonderful space, you're going to need money. So how, I sometimes think that the best stories coming out of animal sanctuaries are about the individual animals themselves, or some, extreme event that people really, that they even though collectively we don't see most of the animals, we can hone in on one, it seems. So one tragic, almost tragic story where, against all hope, this animal made it. The books I've seen have been mostly about the individual animals, but I don't know, maybe there's a story to be made about why you'd want to do this in the first place. Maybe there's a how-to, best practices kind of a way to talk to, because there are, as you said, there are a lot of sanctuaries out there, and we want them to thrive. What do you think about that?
I think both ideas are good. I love the idea of choosing a few animals because, yes, I mean, there's a reason why I remember here in the UK in the 90s, we started seeing TV adverts where you were urged to sponsor a specific child. And that's where that idea comes from. It's very difficult, when you just ask people, please give us money for this huge group of people who need it. You kind of feel like, oh, my money's just going to get lost in this pool of. But if you know that your £5 or $5 a month is going to educate a specific child, and then they would even have, that child will actually write to you and tell you how their life is going and what they've learned that month. And that had huge impact. The increase in donations in the UK went through the roof when people realized, oh, okay, this makes it more personal. Well, it's the same thing with animals. You can talk about lots of chickens. I'm thinking of chickens because just behind you, I can see a chicken. So I'm thinking of chickens, but I love chickens, but if you talk about one specific chicken who actually has a name and how she's, got through everything and now she's thriving, people connect to that. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. And that becomes part of your mission. Something that I teach with all of my clients. And I've worked with people, I've worked with vegans, I've worked with social entrepreneurs, I've worked with B Corp founders, they've written so many on so many varied topics. But the one key thing I always say is these books are all about helping people understand your mission through your stories. There's nothing worse than someone telling you their mission without any stories in there. You just feel like you're being lectured to, or you don't want that. It's through stories. So absolutely put in your stories of your different animals and what they've been through and where they are now and their journey. People love that. People want to connect. So I think that's a great idea. Regarding a how-to, that could work, although that would be I would say a how-to would be more, you're doing it for more altruistic reasons, in that you want to inspire perhaps the next generation of animal sanctuary owners. So like, this is my story, this is the things I did really badly, don't make the same mistakes that I did, that kind of thing. That would work. I'm not sure from an animal sanctuary point of view, I'm not sure if that's the most commercial fit. And I think you hit the nail on the head earlier, Cheryl, when you said, most people get into this sort of thing because there was a need and they just needed to step in and make a difference. And thank God for people like that. Thank God for people who
absolutely.
So, well, it's got nothing to do with me, I'll just look away. Thank God for people who just say, no, I'm going to do whatever I can, whatever tiny thing I can do, I'm going to do it. They don't really get into it thinking in terms of profit and loss and that sort of thing. But what I found speaking to so many different kinds of charities, not just animal charities, all kinds of charities, is that the best charities and the most long-lasting charities, they make the biggest impact, are run like a business.
Right.
You have to think like that. I hate the fact that this is the truth, but money does make the world go round. You can have the biggest heart in the world, but if you don't keep an eye on your balance sheet, those animals are not going to be with you for very much longer. So you do have to sit there and think in terms of what is commercial, what's going to give you the biggest return on investment, that sort of thing. So if I was to advise, if there's an animal sanctuary owner in front of me now and said, I've got 2 book ideas, I've got one which is all about my mission and why I've got into this, and I've got all these amazing stories about my animals, or I've got a how-to book, I would say, let's do the story of your animals. That's the one that's going to make people, especially your current donors, make them want to give you even more money, and hopefully get them, because now the book becomes a great referral tool. It will get them to actually give it to other potential donors who will then read, oh, wow, what an amazing organization. I want to give money to this organization. That is not going to happen so much with a how to open a sanctuary kind of book.
I hear you. If you're just joining us, I'm Cheryl Moss with Better Life for Animals, and I'm having a wonderful conversation with Mitali Deypurkaystha, the vegan publisher. And we are talking about how publishing can get the word out around animal sanctuaries. So, I think it's interesting that we're talking about money, because sometimes I struggle with that. It's like I make my money here, I have my philanthropy here, the two of them don't necessarily meet, and yet that's not accurate. Yeah, you need money. The world runs on money, and it's really just, it's energy, is it not?
Yes, it is.
And I need to, and others I think also need to embrace that we need that energy to make a difference. And, as we've talked about sanctuaries, but there's all sorts of other compassionate businesses out there who are doing it to make a living. They're making money, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But, so they all need to come together. So do you work with clients that are trying to sell a product as well, and or all sorts of missions around most of the time?
Most of the time. In fact, I would say the vast majority of my clients are making a living from what they're doing. So they're social entrepreneurs, they're B Corp founders, ethical business owners, plant-based business owners. Yes, they're making a living from what they do. So I have had a few who wrote about something not to do with how they make a living, but the vast majority, it's their livelihood as well. So don't be afraid to marry the two things. Actually, I always think, what could be nicer than to be working? That's your main vocation. and also be impacting in some incredible way, whether that's animals, whether that's humans, whether that's the planet, or a mixture or all of the above. So yeah, you've actually reminded me of one of my current clients at the moment. He hasn't published yet, but he's a vegan activist here in the UK, and he's writing a book to inspire the next generation of animal activists. Something he realized a long time ago. He's called Don Jeevy, awesome gentleman, just incredible. And he noticed that a lot of activists tend to burn out in their late 20s and early 30s because the current kind of activism is boots on the ground. It doesn't really lend itself to someone getting a little bit older, maybe aren't able to just sleep on friends' couches anymore, sleep on bits of floor or anything like that. They also have other needs and wants as they get older. Maybe they want to settle down, maybe they want to have children, maybe they want to have a house, and they realize, wow, I need to actually go and get myself a career. But now that doesn't leave much time for activism, so there's the issue here. And he's writing an incredible book to show how he's able to fit in his activism with his career. So the two things don't have to be separated. And he's playing with it. He hasn't named his book yet, but it's going to be interesting what he names it. But he's been playing with a portmanteau of two words. He talks a lot about using capitalism for activism. And there's possibly a play on words there that could even be, I've said captivism or something like
Absolutely.
That could be like
I love it.
A mixture of those two words.
I think we're creating a title as we speak. Yes.
Yeah. He's probably going to listen to this and go, oh my God, you've already named my book and you didn't even ask me. But there you go, So yes, and I hope, especially if you have an animal sanctuary, because it is a non-profit. Sometimes we do think, oh, it's a non-profit, therefore we shouldn't really have to look at numbers. I think even more so, you need to look at numbers. Just because you're not making a profit doesn't mean you not need to be looking at things like efficiencies and where you can actually get the best return on investment. You have to think like a business. Even if you have a non-profit, as I said before, the world's leading charities are run as if they were businesses.
Exactly.
And that's why they're doing so well. And that's why they're creating so much impact in the world.
And you want qualified people who
Absolutely.
have other options, so that you want to pay them well. There's no reason why they can't get paid just like everyone else. But I love what you're saying, because we're such a small percentage of the population, and everyone can't just stop what they're doing and become an activist. They have a life to live, as you mentioned. So the thought that you can have that life and your passion or your side pursuit can be, activism to help move this cause forward. I think if we got a lot of people that did that, we would grow exponentially.
Absolutely. Because if you think about it, we spend almost a third of our life at work, and a third of our life asleep. So that doesn't give us much time to really spend on causes. So if we can marry our cause into how we make a living and how we make money, and that's more, it's what I do with the vegan publisher. The reason why I opened the vegan publisher is I wanted to make a living, not just do something part-time, but actually full-time, make a living by shining a spotlight on incredible people, getting their missions out there. So if they're a for-profit business, they make a ton of money. If they're a non-profit, they get lots of sponsors, lots of donations, and they make a bigger impact. And that's my full-time work. I'm now moving into AI consultancy, but again, I'll be working with third sector. I'm working with B Corps. I'm working with social entrepreneurs. And again, making sure they implement AI to make the biggest impact on human beings and animals, not replacing human beings. So I've always just, something I actually learned from, this gentleman, David Pennell from
yes.
Business Tribe.
Wonderful guy.
He's an amazing guy. And he's the one who told me, make your business, your activism, your activism doesn't have to be this separate thing that you do part-time. It can be at the core of who you are. And the vast majority of your hours every week, you're actually spending to it.
Yes. So if somebody wants to work with you, would they need to already have a book lined out? Would they just need to have an idea? Who is your ideal client? How do you work with them?
Well, they can be at various stages. A lot
Okay.
of people, the vast majority of people come to me with an idea, but they don't really know how to restructure it all that well. I mean, I always say anybody can write a book. If you can write, you can write a book. But there's one thing writing a book, and it's quite another to write it well. And then quite another thing beyond to write it in a way that really resonates with people. And that's a key thing because the book itself, and this is actually a bit of a warning or a disclaimer perhaps, the book itself is not going to make you huge amounts of money. The
Right.
book is to act as a spotlight on what you and your organization do. For an animal sanctuary, I would actually recommend you even set up some kind of fundraising for the book, some kind of Kickstarter or something like that, a Just Giving page, even where you actually say, hey, we're going to write an amazing book about our sanctuary. It's going to feature all these animals and their stories, and getting people to actually pay for you to get the book done to a professional level. Because otherwise, a sanctuary could be spending thousands on getting a book to a very good professional level, which it needs to be for it to be taken seriously.
Right.
So you could be spending, and again, you're now stuck. This is the worry. I've spoken to a number of animal sanctuaries who I've ultimately turned away because I've said, you do realize working with me and my team, it's going to cost you several thousands of pounds or dollars. That's money you could be spending on your sanctuary, on your animals, on your cause. And ultimately, yes, having a book out there will mean more money. That old saying, you're speculating to accumulate. But most sanctuaries are on a thin line anyway. They don't have much money. So if I take money off them, I can't sleep at night because I'm thinking that's fewer animals that they can now help because they're working with me and my team. So I always tell them to go away and figure out a way that they can fundraise to work with someone like me and my team. We can then get the most professional, amazing book from them. And then we launch that out into the world. So yes, some people come to me with an idea. I do have people that come to me who've already almost written the book. That I have worked with a few people like that. The only problem with that is I always jokingly say, it depends on how well the book's been written, and I feel bad if it's been terrible. How do I tell somebody? It's like, oh god, this is terrible, this is such a tedious read. So I hate that. I hate breaking people's hearts. And also sometimes I find that if someone's written a book and there are major issues with it, sometimes it's more difficult to fix the issues than to just bulldoze the entire thing and start from scratch.
Okay.
It's almost like, I've got a couple of friends who renovate houses and then send them on. They kind of flip houses.
Mm-hmm.
And they're now very good at it. They can now, go to auctions and they can instantly pick a house that they know isn't going to take much to get it right. And
Okay. I see. Yes.
but the first few times they've made mistakes. I've had one of my friends in tears, and because she's bought a house, in auction, thinking it was a good deal, and then she's realized it's going to take so much time and effort and money to get it to where it needs to be, that the profit that she makes when she flips it isn't going to be worth all the time and energy she spent on it. So this is the same thing. Sometimes it's easier just to flatten the thing and just start from. So people can come to me with their books, but just be aware, I will have to look through the book and I need to make sure it hits certain standards before we're ready to publish it. Not just for mine and my team's reputation, but also for you guys. I want to make sure that the book we put out there is the one that's going to get you the most attention. The best
Absolutely.
attention as well, not the wrong attention, the right attention. And if I feel like a book's not going to live up to that, I will have to pass on it and say, I'm sorry, but this is not something that we will publish.
Sometimes the board could play an integral role in this. Maybe you have a board member who, has some resources and has, some writing skills, and maybe they could take over that charge while you tend to, the animals, which I think most of them are very much focused on. Well, this has been wonderful, Mitali. Can you tell us is there anything that you want to discuss that before we go that I left out?
Oh no, the main thing I would say is really do look into fundraising. There's a wonderful lady I know, Kathleen knows really well, Kathleen Gage, one of my favorite people in the world. There's a lovely lady called V. Lynn. She's based in the States, and she actually specializes in fundraising. She shows people how to get the most donations, how to create a compelling story. Definitely look to fundraising a book venture, because otherwise there are sadly people out there who will reach out to you and say, oh, we can get a book done for $500 or $1,000. Or the best advice I can give you is run for the hills. There's absolutely no way you can have a book at a professional standard. My editors charge me $1,500 to $2,000 just for the editing. So how can a book be edited and designed and published to the highest standards for just a few $100s? It's just not going to happen. So to make sure that you put a really professional product out there, the best advice I can give you is fundraise for it. And if you need help, find someone like V-Lynn who can help you put together a fantastic fundraising page, so that way you get the most donations and that way you can get the book done.
That's excellent advice. Thank you, Mitali. I think we'll put those names that you mentioned in the show notes for people. That's so helpful. Thank you so much for joining us today. This has been Cheryl Moss at Better Life for Animals. Please like and subscribe to our channel as we're growing, trying to help animal sanctuaries, animal advocates, and all people out there trying to live a more compassionate world.
Thank you for joining us on the Better Life for Animals podcast. Together, we can create a world where all beings are treated with dignity, respect, and care. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you're listening. It helps us reach more people and spread awareness about the incredible work happening in animal sanctuaries. You can also share this episode with friends and fellow advocates to keep the conversation going. Until next time, keep speaking up, taking action, and making a difference for the animals.